Alright, it's next day here, and we're going to take the fin can out of the fin jig, and we're going to see how well that worked out. I think this fin jig's a pretty cool thing. And I'm going to this came with the kit to help line up your fins. I'm just going to kind of look and see how well it worked out comparing it to the fin jig, and it looks like it came out about the same way it would have. So, pretty happy with that. So let's put that away since we don't need it anymore. But you may notice if you're doing the build yourself, I jump around the instructions a little bit, and that's because if I went the way the instructions did, it would take me forever to build the rocket because you have to wait for the glue to dry and then the next step. So I'm pretty sure we all do it. We jump around and we build around drying parts. So again, if I'm jumping around a little bit, it's just out of necessity to avoid having to sit here for long periods of time and not be able to do something because I'm waiting for paint to dry or I'm waiting for glue to dry. So the next step, like I said yesterday, we're going to be attaching the fin can to the upper body tube. Now I got to thinking, originally I was thinking, hey, what if I did this in a 29mm? It'd be really cool, but then I'd be having to have a removable motor mount back here. And I want to try and avoid that. I want to be able to just put the motor mount in and then not worry about it. So my thought was, well, if I wanted to do that, instead of having the ejection up here, blowing the top of the payload section off, I could have it eject down here. Or I could just have this a very snug, tight fit, and we could have the bottom fin can. I can make another fin can and make it for 29mm. And then I can fly a 29mm engine in this, and this thing will go 1300 in with an E engine in it. So I mean, going to 29mm is kind of extreme. So I'm not too awfully worried about doing that. And I'm going to set this one up to go ahead and just go with the standard engine that we have set up in it. So now we got to make sure that when we put this together that it's true and we don't have some funny roll in it. So I put it together and I put it on the edge of the table and I'm rolling it, and you can't really see what's happening up here on this end, but I'm looking at the tube and I'm looking for any waggle or wiggle, and if it's doing a funny loopy roll, you know, where it's going up and down, which means that this isn't straight, and I just keep turning this until I get it to where it lines up straight, and then I'm going to be good to go with that. And it worked out really well that I actually did a dry fit on everything when I mocked it up, and I have all my marks already on there, and I just had to make them darker. Everything lined up pretty well, and this actually lines up pretty good and straight this way, so I'm not having to do any modifications on it. So we're going to be taking our launch lug line and lining those two lines up. You could wait to do your launch lug line till later after you've gotten this far in the build and then just glue it together however you want to do. I'm going to still hold off gluing that part on because I like to work with a small section that I can, and it makes it easier to spin it around. We're going to start working on the fin fillets. So we've got our glue, and it's nice and dry. We used a wood glue. So now we're going to be using the Fix-It Epoxy. I love Fix-It Epoxy because it works so well for fin fillets. It's just a part A and a part B, equal amounts. Has a pretty good working time. Now realize epoxy is a thermodynamic epoxy. That's why it gets hot when it's drying. So if it's warm weather, this epoxy is going to dry very rapidly. If it's cool weather, the epoxy is going to dry slowly. So we want to make sure that the weather's proper and we're working in the operational temperatures for the epoxy. Something I didn't mention was when I put in my motor mount, I did make sure that I had my engine hook between the fin and the launch lug. so that we don't have the motor mount grabbing the launch rail or anything else. It's not interfering with the launch lug, and it's also not right where a fin is, where the fin's going to cause turbulence or the hook's going to cause turbulence or anything like that. I just like keeping things unaligned. It works out that way. So back to the Fix-It. You're going to take, and we're going to get equal parts of A and B. Now this stuff does have a fairly long working time, easily 2 to 3 hours, depending on the external temperature. So remember, this stuff is temperature sensitive, so we don't want to have it sitting there in cold weather and try and work with it, or try and work with it in a very, very hot environment, because it will affect the way it cures. I'm going to be using some of my new tools. Going to need the epoxy together. I got this from Apogee Components. A really great group of people there. Very quick on filling the orders in. Okay, so now we're going to take, it's nice and even color and consistency. We're going to roll it into a long worm. And then we're going to lay it right where we want it. And it's a little bit longer than we need, but that's okay. Now this is important. You need to have a towel so you can wipe your fingers off, because this stuff gets your fingers sticky. Now we're going to roll our finger to push the clay into the fin and make the contact. Firm it up against the contact there. Just like that. Now I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to push it in, and I'm going to drag it along the epoxy. And you can see what it's doing. It's making the fillet for me. Get towards the end, just be very careful that you don't drag it too hard and drag away all your epoxy. You can see where I drug a little bit away from there. To the end here. Nice. So now we've got a nice fillet there. So I'm going to push in the clay where I drug it out by accident, by pulling too hard. We're going to take care of that just like that. Alrighty. We now have all the fillets done on the fins. I think they look pretty good. Obviously we're going to be doing a little bit of sanding to get some of the fuzz off of that, and the best way to do that is to get a wooden dowel of the diameter you need and just glue some sandpaper on it, or you can use your finger or wrap it around a tool, or however you best find yourself able to sand these down. So we're going to let that dry for at least 24 hours, and then we'll come back and start sanding those. Then we're going to have to put wood putty in to fill up any gaps that we missed. The next thing we're going to work on, again we're skipping around on the instructions while I'm waiting for that to dry, while I'm waiting for some epoxy on the eye hook to dry. This is some 5-minute epoxy. And it's glued in there, I just don't want it to twist, so I use the epoxy to keep it from being able to twist. We're going to do the shock cord. So we've got the shock cord mount, and then we've got the Estes rubber band. And what do I do with the Estes rubber band? It goes bye-bye. I'm going to be using Kevlar string or Kevlar braid for my shock cord. If you're using the elastic for sewing, or as some people call it, underwear elastic, you're going to want to make that 3 to 4 times the length of the rocket, total length of the rocket, so that it doesn't snap back and you're not putting too much tension on it, and it helps prevent zippering and other problems. If you're using Kevlar string or thread or braid, you want to go about 4 to 5 times the length of the rocket. I've already trimmed this to the size I want, and the reason for that is you want the ejection charge to blow it away, and that gives it distance to move out and deaccelerate before reaching the end and going tight and causing a zipper or any situations like that. The longer the cord, the less likely you are to zipper. Alright, Alright, so let's go ahead and trim this up a little bit real quick with the scissors or your hobby knife. And I'll be using regular old white glue on this. There's no need to use the wood glue at this point in time. I'll probably end up putting some epoxy over the top of this once it's inside the tube and been glued in there with white glue. The epoxy just kind of firms it up a little bit more. Something else that's nice about the Kevlar is it's naturally flame resistant, so it should not burn through. Okay, fold over on my marks. Got that nice and good. Now, a problem that can occur with Kevlar string, and with any shot cord, is it can pull out of the fold. We've probably had it happen if you've been in the hobby long enough. You've probably had one where it has pulled out somehow. One way to prevent that is to tie a very small knot in the end. And just pull it right down to the end. So that knot's going to act as a bind up and help keep it from coming loose and popping out of your rocket. Okay. So they use a nice little bit of hard card here for the mount, which kind of makes me happy to see them using hard card instead of paper. I actually have traced a lot of shot cords over my time, and I actually keep them in memory on my computer so that I can print them out on stock card. If the rocket comes with it on paper, I'll turn around and print it on hard card because I like hard card better. That's just a stiffer, more durable paper. Okay, squishy, squishy, squishy. A little bit more glue. Spray that around. Table here. And then we'll fold over again. Squishy, squishy, squishy. We can hold that until it starts to firm up. And I got glue on the table, got glue on the fingers. So the shot cord, again, it's really nice because it's naturally flame retardant. It's not going to wear out. This will wear out fairly rapidly. You might get a year. The longer it sits around after, especially after a rocket's fired off and the ejection charge gets to the rubber, it starts tearing it up. It's going to degrade a lot quicker. The elastic, or underwear elastic as I like to call it, it also starts to degrade a lot faster once it's been hit with the ejection charge from the heat and just the natural corrosiveness of the powder and everything from the ejection charge. So it's nice to have something you know that's not going to be corroded by that. I've yet to have a Kevlar string fail on me. I've never really had an issue with some people are worried about the zippering. I've never had that issue. Now I know I need to go in fairly deep, so I always use my fingers as a guide. I just go ahead and put the glue on my finger. That's well deep enough in there. Let's just dab it enough. Put a little bit more and dab more in there. And I can turn around if I want and use a popsicle stick or some other method to put some epoxy up in there afterwards too. And the epoxy, what's nice about that is it actually does help to hold it in there. It also helps to give it a smoothness over the top of the paper so that it's less likely to have issues with the let's slide that in there now. We're less likely to have problems with the parachute or anything snagging on it because the epoxy will just kind of like give it a smoother coating. And that's pushed in there nice and tight. grab one of my little tools I have that I can push in here and actually rub it around in there and make sure that that cord is in there tight. Of course, wipe off our tools. And we've got our shot cord mount. Can't really see it in there. Kind of hard to hold. It's a tall tube, so it's kind of hard to hold it up, but we've got a shot cord mount in there. And we're going to put it down so that the shot cord mount is down, and we're not going to have issues with the glue running out from underneath or anything. I'm going to actually smear a little bit right on it because I had a little bit go off sideways here. If you're good, you can actually dribble it right where you want it. I got a little bit in there. Remember, we don't want extra glue on areas that we don't need it, so be sure to wipe up any glue that goes where you don't want it. Okay, so we're going to set that down up here to dry. Shot cord portion down so that the glue doesn't run away from it. It actually runs to it and dries on it. And we're going to set this off to the side to dry. We're going to glue the nose cone assembly together while we're waiting on some of this other stuff to dry. And we'll be working on the shot cord mount here shortly. Or not shot cord mount, the launch lugs. Okay, remember now, earlier on I took and I sanded the shine off of that so it's not shiny anymore. Now it's going to take paint better. And don't freak out when you first put your first coat of primer on here, because it'll look kind of funny, it'll look fuzzy, but as soon as you sand that primer, it'll smooth out really pretty. So we're going to get our plastic glue. Oh, where did I put my plastic glue? It's kind of cold, so I have to take my glues and stuff inside, which means I have to hump for one for a few minutes when I come back out. Some people will put the glue on this portion, other people will put it inside the nose cone. I'm of the group that put it inside on the edge, and I'll give it a good healthy amount. And when I shove the bottom part in, it will spread that glue for me. So we're going to shove it in and we're going to spin it. And then we're going to set it down facing up. Again, that way the glue runs to the tail and it helps bond it instead of running away from the lip, because you have that inside lip. At least now I have a puddle of glue around that inside lip, and that'll help bond it and glue it inside. So that's about as far as we can go until we have some stuff dry here. We're waiting on the Fix-It Epoxy to dry for the fin tube, and we're waiting on the 5-minute epoxy, which it's set up, but it's still got that sticky feel to it. I like to let it go overnight and harden fully. 5-minute epoxy, yeah, it hardens in 5 minutes, but you can leave a fingerprint in it until the next day, so I like to let it sit overnight whenever possible. And we're going to wait for our shot cord mount to dry. So that's about as far as we can go today.